It's a death-defying life I lead. I take my chances. I die for living in the movies and TV.
Many of you might know that I coach track at Wichita State University, and usually I'm in the kind of athletic department side of campus, and that's where we're going to be heading for our interview today. But I'm starting here more in the historic area for a specific reason. There is some really interesting stuff behind me. There's an old caterpillar, or not how old it is, but it's a caterpillar that's always one of the kind of most photographed parts of the campus over here. And we're near the art building, and we're by these very old and historic buildings, most of them over 100 years old. And in fact, this one right here is called Henry and Hall. And the reason I'm mentioning that one is starting here is because that was Wichita State's first ever basketball court. And I thought it was appropriate, since we're talking to one of the legends of Wichita State basketball today, that we would start here. And at the end of the video, after the interview, I'm going to take you inside and show you the old basketball court. We've come a long way, you can say, since 1921 when that building was built. But our subject for our interview today is one of the legends of Wichita State University. He grew up in western Kansas, came here as a walk-on, earned a scholarship, was an All-American, went to the Final Four. He went to the NBA, played for a couple teams in the NBA, then played all around the world, and led a fascinating life. And now he's back here in Wichita, and I had a chance to walk around and talk about some of the places he's been in his very interesting life. And once again, after that, we'll come back here and show you the old basketball court. Here's Ron Baker, and not too often do we come up to a Sports Illustrated with our guest picture on it. So there you go. What was it like to be on Sports Illustrated cover issue?
Pretty humbling. I remember as a kid getting Sports Illustrated Kids Edition, and they had the 9 players cards in there. But special opportunity there, special team, special coaching staffs, and that photo is going to be up there for a while.
I would say so. Yeah, it's gonna be. And right under is Alafine Chiliok, who's our Olympian, one of our most recent Olympians.
Yep, so I remember Alafine. We were a few years apart, but definitely was around to watch her, and honestly, I had a lot of good friends on your guys' track team. So
yeah, well, that'll be like, as we start talking, obviously the connections with western Kansas, and probably a lot of people that watch this channel like small towns, and obviously you're from western Kansas. So where did you exactly grow up? Because I know you went to high school in Scott City, but where was like your what would you say your childhood home is?
I'll start with that. My family farm is in a town called Utica, Kansas. My dad, grandpa went to school there, my uncle. Us 3 kids went to school in Utica for about 7 years, and then we ended up going to Healy.
I've been there.
Yeah, I was going to say Lake County, down the road. And then in 2004, we actually moved to Scott City, where all of us went to junior high and high school.
Okay.
Going back to Utica, their high school actually shut down in 2000, hence why we moved on to Healy and then moved on to Scott as Healy started to deplete a little bit. Raised on the farm, grew up in a town about 160 people in Utica, born in Hayes, America. So pretty familiar with a lot of the towns that you visit on your journeys out west. Boat drive out there? Probably not. But
what was it like growing up in a small town like that? I mean, I grew up in a small town, so it was just kind of what we knew. But now when you look back at it, do you think of like what was unique about growing up there?
I don't know if unique is the term, but I'd always tell people I'd rather be born in a small town and transition to a big town. Sometimes people that are growing up in a city move to a small town and they're almost overwhelmed with not having access to certain things. But the one thing I always tell people is a small town forces you to get out and do things that maybe some people aren't too comfortable with. We didn't have a lot of video games growing up. It was go hang out with your few friends in town at the park, at the city pool. A lot of those small town characteristics are, started in Utica because you're forced to go mingle with the few people that you're around.
Mm-hmm. So obviously you were a terrific athlete when you were growing up. Did you remember going anywhere as a kid, except, out of western Kansas, that was like, man, this is pretty exciting?
So growing up, we actually did a lot of AAU track. So we traveled the country for nationals. And as a 7-year-old, we actually went to Orlando. So got to go to Disney, Went to Miami as well, and then Richmond, Virginia hosted nationals. So driving 17 hours in a van with your family to go to these places was pretty surreal, coming from Utica.
Yeah. So you end up eventually coming to Wichita State, but where were some other places that you might have thought about going to college?
Yeah, two D1 offers out of high school. One was Arkansas Little Rock in Arkansas, obviously. Not really a town that I enjoyed visiting. It's kind of a ruggish Memphis type town.
Mm-hmm.
So coming from Scott City to there was going to be a pretty big jump. And then the other one was Brookings, South Dakota, where South Dakota State University is.
Okay.
I'd say their town's pretty similar to the D2 schools that we have around Kansas, Fort Hays, Pitt State, Washburn. So two kind of drastic different towns that I went on to visit, and then driving here 4 hours down the road with my folks and visiting here kind of sealed the deal, knowing that they were going to be 4 hours away and not 10.
So you end up coming to Wichita, and we're actually obviously in Koch Arena where, you played basketball. They're redoing the floor, so we can't go in there, but we'll show some pictures of when it was packed house, 10,000 people every game. So what was your impression of living in Wichita? Obviously it's a city, but it's, maybe not like a New York City, which we'll talk about later, but what was it like coming to Wichita and living here for, I guess, 5 years in college?
Sure. Growing up, coming to Wichita was not something we did a whole lot. I think we came to a few track meets, like we said, for like state meets, but it was an adjustment. We'd go to Denver or Kansas City for vacations. Wichita was never really on our radar, so wasn't familiar with Wichita at all. So it took a few years. I had to get a little adventurous. Had a couple family friends show us around when I was here, so that was nice.
This is like the Men in Black elevator where you go in one side and
Use this a few times.
come out the other. So Wichita State, obviously, for people that know, it was the golden era of Wichita State basketball, and you guys went to all kinds of interesting places. Obviously, the history of the team and the Final Four, and that was unbelievable. But were there some trips that you remember that were particularly
Definitely
fun?
Definitely remember most of them. Thinking back, Hawaii was obviously a great trip. Orlando, Cancun. When you're here 5 years, you get to go to some cool places.
Did you, were you mostly, was it all about basketball, or were you able to do some fun stuff when you went there with the team?
You being a track coach, you obviously know a lot of these trips are business trips, right? You get there and the meet or the games the next day, so you get a lot of free time. But luckily, we did get some free time in Cancun, Hawaii, Orlando, Sioux Falls, even when we had a tournament there.
Great times at Wichita State, living in Wichita. And then I know there's probably a short and a long version of getting to the NBA, but you end up playing for the New York Knicks.
Yep.
And so what was it like getting to that point, and what was it like living in New York, and what was it like just being in the NBA?
Sure. The process, I'll say, is the funnest part about getting to the NBA. Being undrafted as I was challenging. It wasn't by any means easy, but that just made that process and I guess getting on a roster that much more tasty, if you will. Like when something's challenging and you accomplish getting on a 15-man roster, really warms not only yourself but those that are around you and helps you get to where you were. New York was one of the only teams. I think there was 2 others that had offered me to come to training camp. I believe it was Chicago and then Brooklyn. So 2 of the 3 biggest cities in the country for a small western campus.
From Utica, Kansas to New York.
Yeah, so explaining teammates where Utica was challenging because they thought it was Utica, New York. But getting to New York, made the 15-man roster. One random day I was in the weight room and there was me and another kid that were pretty much battling out for the 15th spot. And I remember like yesterday, our assistant GM came in when I was lifting. He's like, "Hey, you got a second?" I was like, "Yeah." Let me finish this set, pump and iron, and followed him to Phil Jackson's office and sat down with him and Steve Mills, our president at the time. And the four of us are sitting there, and I knew is, this, like, it's either you're on or you're not. And Phil looked at me. He's like, "All right, Ronnie, we're moving you to the varsity. You're no longer on the JV." I was like, good grief. Phil Jackson just told me I made the 15-man roster. So right after that, I skipped weights and drove to my apartment at the time, called the family. And again, the warmness that you get from just your journey and the process, finally making your childhood dream, was something. I mean, you remember the drive more than remember talking to the legend Phil Jackson.
Yeah, and all those places that you went and traveled, and as a kid played basketball, and it's got to be an amazing. Like, you see that in movies, but to like see it in real life or to experience it in real life had to just been incredible.
Yeah, just I picture like a map and just pinballing all the places we went, all the sporting events, the sacrifices my folks made. Not only just basketball, I was a 3-sport athlete and obviously did track growing up, so I credit a lot of the gifts and skills that are needed in basketball came from other sports that I did. But yeah, the towns and the places we went all came from some sort of sporting event, and seen a lot of cool areas, no question.
So you played for New York for 3 years?
Yeah, just under 3 years.
And what was travel like in the NBA? What was that like?
Everything you can probably imagine. I always tell people, Lil Bow Wow's movie, he's traveling on a private plane with when he makes the team, and I mean it's first class service. You got meals on the plane, you got a meal after you get off the plane, staying in the nicest hotels, you get your own room, and you're treated like a first class citizen, but at the same time you're expected to perform in that manner as well. But it's nice when you get done with the game and you just hop on the bus and go straight to the tarmac, hop on the 747, and you're in the next town in a matter of hours, and repeating the process again the next day.
Yeah, you guys were flying on planes in college, and we're over here riding the buses. So, you had friends at Wichita State that were on the track team, and I know you had connections and lived with those guys and still do. So I know that our guys would talk about, you obviously, and that was a unique time at Wichita State for sure. But so you played with the Knicks, and then you also were with the Washington Wizards for a period of time. That was a short period of time, but was there anything there in DC that was unique?
Yeah, great topic here. Was waived, I believe, in early December by the Knicks. Trained for a couple weeks, and then the Wizards picked me up throughout, probably about a 2-month span. So I spent the holidays in DC, which was awesome. Downtown there is definitely a must see, and then not to mention just like a great sporting town. A lot of history there with the monuments, but their fan base is unbelievable. But yeah, I stayed downtown in DC, spent the holiday there, walked around on Christmas Day, shook Abe Lincoln's giant hand. But yeah, definitely a cool city that I'm glad I stopped at for, even though it was just a few months.
So at that point, were you still playing, trying to be on the NBA roster? But I know you ended up going to Russia for a period of time. What was going on with basketball, and how did you end up in Russia?
Yeah, so ended up getting waived by the Wizards in early February, if I'm not mistaken, and ended up trying to get picked up by another team. Hurt my shoulder in the process, rehabbed it the rest of the spring, and then in the summer of 19, signed with a EuroLeague team, CSKA Moscow, CSKS, and played with them all the way up till March, and then COVID hit. So that was my final year as professional in the EuroLeague. Definitely a cool experience. I think the term that I use going to Europe is perspective. Us people that are raised in America sometimes don't tend to realize that we've only been around for 300, 400 years.
It's a young country.
Yes, very, very young, super modern. And when you go to these different towns and cities in Europe, I think it gives you a better perspective and appreciation of what people not only have over there, but where they come from and how long they've been there. I mean, they have palaces over there and we have monuments. Like, it's just totally different atmosphere. But
so did you live in Moscow and then how was that? What was life like living in Moscow?
So Moscow's a very modern city. I'd have to guess on the population, but it would be equivalent to our New York or our Chicago or our LA. Very big city. Very modern, very clean. Food is pretty much American. I mean, meat and potatoes diet, nothing that'll really catch your eye. But I was in the heart of Moscow. Thankfully, had a driver and a translator. They don't speak a ton of English in Russia, so getting around and going places wasn't too difficult until the language barrier came into effect. It's hard to picture going into a restaurant or going into a mall and trying to get something.
I've been there.
It's hard to get things accomplished when you can't.
You didn't have Google Translate either on the phone. Not that it's that long ago, but the technology.
There was some app that we were using when I was over there, but I didn't trust it a whole lot. So you started to tend to like show pictures and addresses. You could sometimes translate on your phone and they could read it, what meal you wanted, if you needed large bed sheets instead of, full bed sheets at the mall. Like, that was definitely the challenging part. And the other challenging part was just not being able to express your character. Russians tend to be kind of in their bubble, just how they're raised and their nature is. So me going out to jwise and saying, "Hey man, how you doing?"
Right.
His interaction.
Like, if everybody in Western Kansas waves as you're driving.
Yeah. They're like, "How's it going, man?" Like, things are good. How's your sister? Yada, yada, yada. That in Russia was more so, well, why are you saying hi to me? I don't know you. So catching on to things like that. And then the last thing that was super challenging for me with the personality I have, being sarcastic, about 50% of my conversation throughout my life is you can't do that there.
Right.
Because they're thinking you're making fun of them and
gotta be careful.
laughing. So that was a big stepping stone, the 9 months that I was there.
COVID happened. Obviously, that was crazy. Was that, were you trying to continue playing basketball after that, or would that just make like a logical time to stop playing basketball, or what was like during that COVID time and I guess after COVID?
Yeah, there was a few factors that.
And you came back to Wichita, or where did you come back?
I actually came back and lived with my folks in Scott City
Okay.
during the pandemic, and then moved to Wichita in June with one of our roommates at the time. A few factors that ended my career were, one, I just didn't feel like I was comfortable enough to go back to Europe and play so far away from home. When you're in the States, it's nothing for mom and dad to hop on a flight to go to Chicago or Dallas and watch you play and catch up. In Europe, that kind of went out the window. So that was a factor. The other major factor was I'd been battling a hip injury since early years here in Wichita State days. So that was lingering. I felt like it was time to get that fixed. And on top of that, as a pro for 4 years, I had 2 surgeries. So had to kind of weigh my odds as, well, we've been rehabbing longer as a pro than we have been playing. So maybe it's time to throw the towel in and move on to something else.
So you wrote a children's book. Mm-hmm. When was that in that whole process? Was that while you were in college, or was that while you're
Well, it wasn't when I was in college, because
that's true. Could you imagine if you were okay.
I had
if you don't follow college sports, the NIL thing is crazy.
I had to wait till after I was not a collegiate athlete.
Right.
So in about April of 2016, our senior year, I graduated early, and a guy in El Dorado, out of all places, had offered to write a children's book with me, and we did that, published it, got it illustrated, and sold it around like the late August time frame, and I think we had about 6,000 books, and they're all sold and accounted for.
That's awesome.
My mom was an elementary ed teacher, so writing a kid's book just felt kind of fitting, right?
Yeah.
A mom of that background, and it was meant for 5 to 7 year olds.
I remember when that came out, it was definitely a thing. So that's awesome. So you're back in Wichita. We were in the weight room here that one of your teammates helped, donate some money for.
A little different than 10 years ago.
And so what are you doing now? I know that you have a new addition to the family. So why are you back in Wichita, and what's going on with Ron Baker in 2024?
Yeah, moved to Wichita during COVID, like I said, and then met my wife, future wife. We now live in Andover. I have a little 6-month-old girl, Scotty Ray. You can probably guess how she got her name.
Yeah. It's Western Kansas.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah. So we're raising her in Andover. She works for...
Not Utica. You don't want to name her Utica?
No, we didn't want to name her Utica. And I don't think we wanted to raise her there since, they don't have a school. But she works in the healthcare field, as do I. Been working with Via Christi for about 3 years now. Manage our sport medicine department with Dr. Porter and Dr.
Our
Whelan.
doctor for the track team.
Yeah.
And his son is on our track team.
Yeah,
Porter.
That's correct. Yeah, little Porter. Yeah, so how that works is healthcare system here employs athletic trainers throughout our community. There's 5 here at Wichita State that handle some of your athletes. Newman University has 3, and then we have 9 high schools as well. And I get the privilege of managing those agreements for Dr. Porter and Cleveland.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much for the time. And obviously, as we were walking around, we did a little tour of Koch Arena. I guess the final thing, what was it like to play in front of 10,000 people in Koch Arena? And was there any other place that you played that was like that or special? Obviously, the Final Four was a unique experience, but the basketball experience, and most people never played in front of sports in front of a crowd like that. What was that like? And was Wichita State special in that whole situation?
Yeah, we've got it pretty good here as far as our fan base goes. When you can have 10,005 and a sellout in the middle of Kansas where basketball was created, and me being from Kansas, like that's something that doesn't happen a whole lot. So I'm very fortunate to be a part of a culture like that. Outside of Wichita State, obviously our foe in Creighton has a pretty decent following. I don't know if you watch their games. Also, kind of a sneaky NBA town is Oklahoma City. They kind of have that blue-collar fan base. They've had some pretty unique players come through there, and they're always progressively somehow making the playoffs, even though they lose a ton of talent. And then overseas, I would challenge people to get on YouTube and look up EuroLeague basketball highlights. Fans are literally lighting things on fire, not cigarettes, like torches in the games. So it's quite the jump.
Where's the fire marshal?
Yes, correct.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, thanks a lot. It was great visiting with you. And the Wichita State legend Ron Baker made an appearance on Travel with the Wise Guy. I can pretty much end the channel now.
Thanks to Ron for that terrific interview. Very fascinating guy to chat with about all the amazing places he's been and all the awesome stuff that he's done. What a guy. We're back here at Henry and Hall, and let's take a little walk around, and I'll tell you everything that I at least have found out about this historic building. As you enter the building and turn to the right, we'll walk towards the old basketball court. This building was built in 1921. It was called Memorial Gymnasium, and it was the first permanent gymnasium on campus. And you can see now as we walk into the place where they used to play basketball for the Shockers, the Wichita State Shockers. They ended up changing the name to Henryan. There was a person that gave a lot of money, I guess, to help with the construction, and they added a women's gymnasium to this building as well in the late 1920s. It's pretty cool to walk around and kind of see where the old gymnasium, stands were, and we're walking kind of up to the upper deck. They had dances here. Certainly back in that time, the campus was much smaller, and this was one of the main places on campus. It's now a School of Art, Design, and Creative Industries for ceramics and sculptures. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video. These are new videos on Tuesday. We're calling them off the grid because they're a little bit off the grid from the normal Thursday and Sunday videos. So on Tuesday, there'll always be something a little bit different, a little bit random. You'll never know. Maybe an interview, maybe some sort of related travel video, but certainly different from Thursday and Sunday. So thank you for watching here on Tuesday. Some new things on the website. We have offered memberships now, and we've had a lot of people sign up to become executive producers, and supporters, different levels, different tiers to support the channel. And with each tier, there are more and more perks. So thank you for those who have become members, and hopefully we'll see more of you in the behind the scenes section of our membership. Also on my website, I have lots of new stuff. I have new merchandise available, some Ghost Town shirts, some Death Go Round shirts that are very popular right now. The newsletter I send out about every 3 weeks. It's totally free, so sign up for my newsletter. And I have a new section on there of Google Map where I have dropped a pin in every place that I've done a video about. And if you click on that link, you can find the videos about those areas. So that one is new to the website, and hope you guys like that one. Once again, thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you either now on Tuesday, Thursday, or Sunday.